This is Beyond the Business.
Air is the most basic condition of human life. A person can survive weeks without food, several days without water, but without air, survival is measured in minutes. Every human being takes roughly 20,000 breaths every day, and yet the air we breathe is rarely discussed in terms of rights. In many legal systems, constitutions guarantee the protection of public health and the environment. But what does that promise actually mean when the air itself becomes polluted? If breathing is necessary for life, does every person have a fundamental right to breathe clean air? And if that right exists, who is responsible when it cannot be guaranteed? Across the world, legal frameworks increasingly recognize the concept of a healthy environment. Many constitutions include provisions requiring governments to protect environmental conditions that support public health. In Europe, countries such as Poland, Germany, and France include environmental protection within constitutional law. In India, the Supreme Court has interpreted the right to life as including the right to clean air. At the operational level, the United Nations has recognized access to a clean and healthy environment as a human right. These legal principles create a powerful promise. Governments are expected to protect the environmental systems on which human life depends. But this promise raises a difficult question. What happens when environmental protection fails? Most legal frameworks define responsibility in general terms. Very few define what happens when pollution persists for years or decades. This creates a legal gray zone between principle and reality. Despite these legal guarantees, billions of people live in cities where air pollution regularly exceeds safe limits. According to the World Health Organization, almost the entire global population now breathes air that exceeds recommended pollution thresholds. In many large metropolitan regions, pollution levels periodically reach concentrations far above international health guidelines. In parts of South Asia, winter pollution episodes can push particulate level dozens of times above recommended levels. In North America and Europe, industrial basins and winter heating systems can trap pollutants over urban areas. In Central Europe, seasonal smoke events remain a recurring challenge in several cities. For many residents, relocation is not a realistic option. People live where employment exists, where families live, and where entire economic systems are built. In practice, millions of people spend their entire lives breathing air that exceeds recommended safety thresholds. This creates a fundamental tension. If clean air is considered a basic right, what does that right mean for people who cannot escape polluted environments? Air pollution has rarely a single cause. Instead, it emerges from a complex systems. Industrial production releases emissions into the atmosphere. Transportation networks produce exhaust gases. Residential heating systems burn fuels during cold seasons. Power plants generate electricity for growing cities. Even geography plays a role. Mountain valleys, temperature inversions, and wind patterns can trap pollutants over urban regions. In this sense, polluted air is not simply the result of individual actions. It is the byproduct of entire economic systems. Cities grow, infrastructure expands, energy consumption rises. And the atmosphere becomes the shared layer where all these activities meet. Everyone participates in the system, but no single actor fully controls it. Air pollution is not only a public health issue, it is also an economic one. According to the World Bank, air pollution costs the global economy an estimated $8.1 trillion every year in health impacts, lost productivity, and premature deaths. That figure represents roughly 6% of the global GDP. The World Health Organization estimates that around 7 million people die prematurely each year due to exposure to polluted air. Many of these deaths are linked to fine particulate matter known as PM2.5. These microscopic particles are small enough to enter deep into the lungs and bloodstream. Long-term exposure increases the risk of respiratory diseases, cardiovascular conditions, and reduced life expectancy. Polluted air therefore creates costs far beyond environmental damage. It places enormous pressure on healthcare systems and national economies. This creates one of the most difficult questions in environmental policy. Who is responsible for the air people breathe? Is it industry that produces emissions? Transportation systems moving millions of vehicles? Energy infrastructure powering cities? Or governments regulating these systems? In reality, responsibility is distributed across the entire system. Environmental policy usually focuses on reducing emissions over the time, but it rarely addresses citizens who are already living inside polluted environments today. If clean air is considered a fundamental right, the absence of clean air raises an uncomfortable question. What happens when that right cannot be guaranteed? In most countries, there is no clear answer. In recent years, the question of clean air has increasingly entered courtrooms. Citizens and environmental organizations have begun challenging governments over air pollution. In 2018, the European Court of Justice ruled that Poland had violated European Union air quality standards after years of excessive particulate pollution. The case was brought by an environmental law organization called Climate Earth. The court concluded that the government had failed to take sufficient measures to protect citizens. In India, the Supreme Court has repeatedly linked air pollution directly to the constitutional right to life. These cases illustrate an emerging legal principle. If pollution threatens human health, governments may be legally responsible for failing to prevent it. But legal recognition does not automatically solve the problem. Even when courts rule in favor of clean air, improving environmental conditions can take many years. In 2020, a British coroner ruled that air pollution contributed to the death of 9-year-old Ella Adukisi Debra. She lived near one of London's busiest roads where pollution frequently exceeded legal limits. It was the first time air pollution was officially listed as a cause of death on a death certificate. In Germany, court rulings forced cities such as Stuttgart and Berlin to introduce restrictions on diesel vehicles. At the international level, the UN Human Rights Council recognized in 2021 that access to a clean, healthy environment is a human right. These developments show a significant shift. Air pollution is increasingly being treated not only as an environmental issue, but as a matter of human rights. Air pollution can look very different depending on how cities are governed. Hanoi, the capital of Vietnam, has become one of the most polluted cities in the Southeast Asia. Average PM 2.5 levels often exceeds 40-50 micrograms per cubic meter, nearly 10 times higher than World Health Organization guidelines. Rapid urban growth, dense motorbike traffic, coal-based energy, and construction dust all contribute to the problem. In South America, the city of Santiago in Chile faces a different challenge. The city sits in a basin surrounded by the Andes Mountains. During winter temperature inversions, polluted air becomes trapped above the city. So PM 2.5 levels frequently exceeds 40 micrograms per cubic meter, creating seasonal smog events affecting millions of residents. At the other end of the spectrum is Helsinki in Finland. Average particulate pollution levels remain 4 to 6 micrograms per cubic meter, close to international health guidelines. Strict environmental regulations, strong public transport systems, and long term energy policies help maintain some of the cleanest urban air in Europe. These cities demonstrate a critical reality. Air pollution is shaped not only by geography or economic activity, it is shaped by governance. As urban pollutions grow and environmental pressures increase, the questions of air rights may become more important. If governments recognize the right to a healthy environment, new policy discussions may emerge. Should citizens living in the heavily polluted regions receive additional health protection? Should environmental standards trigger automatic policy responses when pollution exceeds safe limits? Could governments introduce a public health programs, infrastructure investments, or economic adjustments in regions where pollution remains persistent? These questions are only beginning to enter public debate, but they may become increasingly relevant in the coming decades. Air is the only resource every human shares continuously. Cities have borders, countries have borders, but the air above them does not. It moves freely across regions, carrying both the benefits and the consequences of human activity. Modern societies have built legal systems that recognize the importance of protecting the environment. Yet the mechanisms for protecting the air we breathe remain incomplete. And as cities continue to grow, the questions may become impossible to ignore. If every human being depends on the air to live, does society recognize a right to breathe safely? And if that right exists, who is responsible when the air becomes unsafe?